Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back again in this recording. In our recording, we'll just get started with the podcast of today. And it's actually an essay called The Art and Science of Interpretation, Bridging Arabic and English. But let me just twist the screen a little bit here so you're directly into my face. The conversation that we are going to have right now is purely for translators/interpreters because here we talk and delve into the valleys and mountains and the topography of language and just go through these wavy, tortuous, and treacherous aspects of language that translators and interpreters need to go through because it's part of the job. And this is not for the mainstream viewers and listeners or watchers who just come swing by just to say hi to my channel. This is pure discussion of aspects that have to do with the science of translation and interpretation. So, welcome to our podcast on interpretation. Today, we're diving into diving. Diving means going deeper. So, I'll have a two-edged sword purpose for this kind of discussion. But first, because it's a podcast, so I get the chance to talk with you about whatever I like. And second, the purpose of podcast is if you're stuck in a traffic or you just want to enjoy the podcast, you will go through some of these terms, and these are terms that you need for the mastery of the science or the skill or the profession of interpreters and translators. So we're diving, we're going deeper. So if you check it out on dictionary, dive, it means to the sort of sport of swimming or exploring underwater. Metaphorically speaking, diving into the world of interpretation is a metaphor. It is just an interpretation of an image in your mind that as if you're just jumping into deep water. Not talking specifically about Mariana Trench kind of water, but I'm talking in general. So this kind of term is a term that we come across usually when we talk about it in interpretation or in translation into the fascinating world of interpretation. Specifically, we're going to talk about interpreting between Arabic and English and the key aspects of translation that you need. So focusing on interpretation between Arabic and English, this is the field of challenge. Sometimes people who work in the territory of translation struggle with the translation from Arabic to English because they lack the context and the target language, or they haven't learned enough, or they don't amass enough vocabulary to give them the maneuverability and flexibility and elasticity to express something linguistically. And this is one of the shortcomings of translators in general, that the kind of language that they speak as a second language is not mature enough, has not been matured enough in their mind because of the lack of context. They usually have some translation breakdown through the career or in certain kind of situations. Eventually, we're not artificial intelligence. We are human beings. But the upper hand that we have is the fact that sometimes we can translate emotions. Sometimes we translate the cultural gaps. Sometimes we overcome them. Sometimes we, avoid nations, big conflict, just because of certain kind of things in translation that artificial intelligence doesn't recognize. So focusing on interpreting between Arabic and English, we're exploring the key aspects of interpreters the interpreters must master and examine in modern approaches. We have methods and approaches. We're talking about the approach as the arc, as the umbrella that has so many methods within it to go through and about to deliver the meaning in the target language, whether that's be English, Arabic, Chinese, French, whatever, especially in diplomatic context. So interpreting and interpretation is an intricate art that goes beyond mere language translation. It involves conveying not only the words but also the cultural nuances, these minor little details that are cultural, emotions and intentions behind them. So you're not just literally translating. Don't act as if you're a machine, because once you're transferring something from Arabic to English or from English to Arabic, you have to make sure that you convey the emotions and cultural nuances that encapsulate the term or the sentence or the idiom or the phrasal verb that is said, even on the expense of time and the longevity of the translation. And this is including interpreting the term and not just translating it only. Interpreting means making the term understood by the target audience. We're interpreting, we're decoding the concept. This is also especially critical, very important, when interpreting between languages as distinct as Arabic and English, which is crazy. These two languages are completely different. One of Semitic origin, which is Arabic, and one of a mix of a bastard of languages, German, Latin, Greek, Spanish, Dutch, and other, clans and tribes that just made the modern form of English, each with its own rich cultural and historical context. And remember, historical and cultural context are quintessential elements of any successful translation and interpretation. Key aspects of interpretation and translation. And remember, when I say translation, sometimes I interchangeably use that term with the counterpart of interpretation. But our core is interpretation. Language proficiency. An interpreter must possess an exceptional command of both source and target language. S and TL, source language and target language. These are key essentials here. Exceptional command is not a word or a term that is haphazardly and randomly and sporadically thrown on the table. No, it's an exceptional command of both languages. You have to start from scratch, building on your Arabic repertoire and moving on. Delve into the culture, heritage, literature, culture of Arabic. Try to understand religion, try to understand diplomacy, try to understand history, and then encapsulate that with the target language. That is how you will have an exceptional command of English and Arabic. And this includes understanding various dialects, idiomatic expressions, and technical, vocabulary. But it gets a little bit tricky. You're not demanded to be a walking encyclopedia when it comes to interpretation. You just need to familiarize yourself with the terms that are technical within the field of your expertise, because eventually you're not expert in oil, you're not expert in pharmacy, you're not expert in clinical pathology and the other, very specific and detailed majors. You just need to be familiar with the target wood and forest that you're heading to, especially before a big conference and meeting. For example, for Arabic, this means being familiar with classical Arabic and Modern Standard Arabic that we call MSA, Modern Standard Arabic, which is usually common written version of the classical Arabic that, has been there for 1400 years, as well as the regional dialects. For example, Levantine, Jordan, Palestine, Syria, Iraqi dialect, Moroccan, Algerian, and Tunisian kind of dialects. Just be familiar with them if you are in the situation of interpreting within these kind of contexts. And then we have the Gulf Arabic, which has a very specific kind of terms that you need to be familiar with, not to be insulting to the target audience or target language. Cultural competence. Look, I am not sure if there is a definitive definition of what competence is. I don't think, because this is like emotions. We cannot scale it on a scale and say, well, I do have 2 kilos of emotions, or sad emotions, or my girlfriend just broke up with me and I have a ton of negative emotions. Competence is not scalable in the sense of measuring it, because in modern interpretation / translation, we try to quantify and qualify and measure and operationalize the kind of terms that we use, because this gives people an arithmetic or digital or numeric compass to understand what we are talking about. So if I say you need to be familiar with the top 2,000 words that are key words in the field of translation / interpretation. This is a numerical conversion of the theory or theoretical proposal or proposition that the translators need to be at least on top of this kind of terms to be able to be qualifiable to be translators in certain kind of contexts or conferences. So cultural competence. Cultural knowledge is crucial, essential, necessary, important, quintessential, milestone, very, very, very critical here. Interpreters need to understand the cultural context. And look at the S here, please. Look at the S. Context. It's not like a context. You need to understand the term, whether it's used in spoken or written, whether it's spoken in casual, formal written, or casual, informal written, or casual spoken formal, or spoken formal, or spoken informal, or the other varieties here, and which one of which is used or the speaker is intending to use. Both languages. And we talk about languages, we're not talking about dialects here, so keep that in mind. To avoid misunderstanding. Usually happens. It's not the end of the world. It's not the Armageddon that is going to, happen if we just make a mistake. We are human beings. We have to accept the fact that translators can be traitors, but translators can make mistakes, which is really important. But, it's a shame that the translator can make mistakes within very small nuances, like, for example, saying a month of the year in Arabic, but just making a mistake of not saying exactly the name of the month. For example, saying November as Kanun Thani, for example, which is a critical small nuance, but it's just an indicator that the translator or interpreter has not done his homework well, has not prepared. And to convey the speaker's intent accurately. Now, remember, and politely, how can we, if you ask yourself, how the hell am I supposed to interpret the intention of the speakers? Well, understand the context. Sometimes if you look at the emotions of the emotions on the face of the speakers, male and female, morning or afternoon, the kind of cup they use, the kind of drink that they are offering, whether they are agitated, whether they are hyper, whether they are, having certain kind of movability issues, the way they're sweating on their faces, all of that can be good, signal to you the kind of intent that they are trying to convey accurately. So use your own linguistic antennas, use your own pragmatic antennas, use your own observation antennas to understand the intent. For example, certain kind of phrases and gestures that are polite in one culture might be offensive in another. And this is a true story that was told to me by a former minister in the Iraqi government. And he said, we were on a delegation to Germany, and the Iraqi official tried to touch the head of one of the German kids. And it's a big no-no in Germany, as far as I know, and as far as he told me, that this is a big no-no. So don't touch the head of a child. And the translator tried to say to the minister that this is just the wrong way of just approaching children in Germany, because that might just subject you to certain kind of diplomatic crisis. Anyways, this is a kind of thing that the translator/interpreter can just detect using his own antennas and, go about finding a solution to troubleshoot this kind of situation or this kind of pickle, to quote Inglorious Bastards with E, by Quentin Tarantino. Subject matter expertise. Interpreters often specialize in specific fields such as legal, medical, or diplomatic. I cannot say exactly that they are specialized, but the kind of demand of the job that they have is to be within that kind of territory. And because they spend years having these kind of words and vocabulary circulate in their own mind and desktops and paperwork and translated document, they become familiar, and that gives them the identity of being experts in that field. So the level of fluidity of their translation and transferring and conversion from Arabic to English and from English to Arabic, especially in court, is commendable. Interpretation. Understanding the terminology, not only understanding, but delivering the meaning and conventions of these fields is essential. Diplomatic interpretation, in particular, and this is something very specific, requires a deep understanding of international relations and protocols. And I think the key here is to listen to as many UN conferences as possible. I'm sorry, I don't have any PTSD. I don't have any ADHD. I'm just not comfortable on this chair because the temperature here in this room, while I'm recording, I have to turn off all the air condition not to make noise. So bear with my sweating. Active listening and memory. Just going back, dialing one step behind here. Diplomatic interpretation. You need to listen to the UN interpreters and translators. Those are the best of the best of the best elite of translators. They graduate from the best elite institutes that give them intensive training on interpretation and translation. With all the theoretical background aside, they subject them to rigorous, intensive, pass or fail, consecutive months of training on interpretation. You can find them on Google. You can find them on YouTube. Listen to how many hours, hundreds of hours, to familiarize yourself with this kind of territory. It's not a piece of cake. You need to wear an iron shield once you are in the field of translation. You need to be subject to intense level of translation. You need to be subject to intense level of circumstances to qualify you to be a good translator/interpreter. So buckle up, be ready, and accept the fact that you will be criticized at some point, or a person next to you might help you with the translation because you just lost the attention or one of the words slipped because you were thinking of the kind of next order you'll have on Amazon. Active listening and memory. Memory practice. Interpreters must be excellent listeners. Now, how can you be an excellent listener? Listen more. There is no shortcut to that. I mean, you just need to listen to how many videos as possible, public speakers. One thing that I do, and I keep reiterating in the previous videos and workshops and podcasts that I've talked about in the field of translation, is something that I usually do if I have a meeting for translation with a public figure. I go and watch like 20 of his latest videos just to be familiar with the kind of terms he uses, because they tend to use and circulate these kind of terms and say them again and 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 again. So they just become active vocabulary. And every person has a list of active vocabulary and dormant, hibernating vocabulary in the back of his cortex or hippocampus that they don't use. They just recognize visually. Active listening and memory. Interpreters must be excellent listeners. That's it. To grasp the full meaning of the spoken words quickly. And by quickly, we mean in milliseconds. They also need strong short-term memory. Now, strong short-term memory is very important. I think one of the things that you have to do is just take notes of the keywords. So if I say, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled pepper, you just need to say there is a person, his name is Peter, he picked a kind of pickles on the seashore or somewhere else. So the idea is that you have to train your short memory by practicing consecutively, listening to the public speakers, and retain chunks of speech, not just one word. And if you retain the word, it has to be a meaningful word that helps you build the context to the audience who are just ignorant of the fact that something was said in a language that they're ignorant about. Ignorant in a positive way, not negative way. Enough to interpret them accurately. And accurately, we say 99.9%, if not more. Emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is a key, but I don't know exactly how people define emotional intelligence from the perspective of interpreters. Interpreters must manage their emotions and stay neutral, even in heated discussions. This is particularly important in diplomatic settings where tensions may run high. And remember, in heated conversations and debates and diplomatic setting, the kind of tension is running high, and you have to hold your composure. You have to express yourself neutrally without being influenced by either one of the parties that are just contending with each other. And you just need to exactly say what it is, said without any, manipulation, because you're not supposed to collude with one party over the other. Modern approach to interpretation. In the digital age of artificial intelligence, interpretation has evolved with the advent of new technology such as ChatGPT and his fellow commanders in the field of translation and interpretation, in addition to the machine-assisted translation such as Google Translate and other applications, etc., etc. Remote interpretation. Advances in technology have made remote interpretation possible. However, platforms such as Zoom, Microsoft Teams now offer interpretation features such as conferences and simultaneous translation, allowing interpreters to work from anywhere in the world. But despite the fact that the advances that are happening right now, these platforms need real translators, because when the stakes are really high for translators. This has made interpretation services more accessible and flexible. So it is for our advantage. It's just the fact that we need to adapt and adopt. Machine assistant interpretation. Oh boy. While machine translation tools like Google Translate have improved, well, they did, but they still make mistakes. Human interpreters remain irreplaceable. And remember, this is something that you should bear in mind. Human interpreters are irreplaceable within the coming years. Why? There's so many reasons. I can count 100. And I have talked about it in a previous video, especially for nuanced and context-rich languages such as Arabic. However, semicolon, interpreters are now using these tools to assist with the preliminary translation, the الترجمة الأساسية, basic, and to handle large volumes of text more efficiently. Now, the match that is made in heaven is when you are a very knowledgeable translator / interpreter, and you use, machine assisted interpretation for your advantage. You can be super rich. You can be the next Tim Cook. Continue joking. Continuous professional development. The field of interpretation is constantly evolving. Just like any other field. Interpreters must stay updated with the latest developments and advances in both languages and in their areas of expertise. For example, you just need to constantly read more. You need also not to read more, but to take notes of the recent terms that have entered into the field of your interpretation, whether that's legal, technical, scientific, etc., etc. This includes attending workshops, participating in training programs, and engaging with professional communities. And I may add one thing that I have just remembered: attend conferences on interpretation and translation by investing a portion of the payment that you get from your work as a translator. It's a high-paying job if you know how to do it right and if you work hard on yourself. So, diplomatic interpretation is a unique and highly specialized field. And oh boy, I have seen recently 2 or 3 shameful interpretations for foreign representatives of certain Martian country that starts with an I letter. Interpreters in this arena, في هذا المجال, في هذا الميدان, must navigate complex political landscapes. How do we translate complex political landscapes? الأبعاد أو الميادين أو المنظورات السياسية المعقدة, and ensure that communication is not only accurate but also conducive to building and maintaining relationships between nations, because you are a messenger of your country and your nation. You're not representing yourself, so don't and stop saying sexual jokes to other people in other countries just because you want to make them laugh. Big no-no. Here, the stakes are high, as a single misinterpreted word can lead to significant diplomatic repercussions. Diplomatic repercussions هي أو أبعاد دبلوماسية لا يحمد عقباها. In summary, interpretation between Arabic and English requires a blend of linguistic proficiency that you mature through the process of your training, attending conferences, reading more, socializing with intellectuals, attending classes, training really hard. Cultural insight, اللي هي النظرة الثقافية أو البعد الثقافي أو الذكاء الثقافي. Subject matter expertise, and emotional intelligence. Modern interpreters leverage technology. They utilize technology to enhance their work, but the human element remains irreplaceable, especially in diplomatic context. العنصر البشري لا يمكن استبداله. Thanks for you joining us today. I really think this discussion, and in this discussion, we shed a little bit of light on the role interpreters play in bridging cultural gaps and, fostering better communication among nations and understanding in this kind of interconnected world. So I hope you stay tuned, and to stay tuned is to stay subscribed and to get the notifications for the kind of podcast that we are making and we're trying to produce. Thank you very much for listening to this podcast. We dedicated this podcast as a short, podcast / workshop to help you understand the concept of translation and interpretation better, with a little bit of focus more on interpretation. Thank you very much. مدرب اللغة وليد خالد.